So one of the questions that John Campia got sent in to his show yesterday, which became one of his top four main topics. As a matter of fact, it was his fourth topic that he kind of finished off the main portion of the show with before answering fans' questions. Was basically about the fact that Venom, Let There Be Carnage, was getting a PG rating by the MPA, or some of us still like to call him the MPAA. And this, of course, kind of upset some folks because of the fact that they felt that with Carnage now involved, that it should be a little bit more violent, a little bit more darker, and perhaps a little bit more bloody and gorier in some places, thus, earning itself or resulting in earning itself an R rating. But you have to remember this. Sony right now, for the time being, and I think that deal is coming up real soon. But for the time being, Sony is in a deal with Disney, and of course, Disney, they own Marvel Studios. So Sony is in kind of a partnership with Disney through the Marvel Studios Association when it comes to any Marvel properties. And because of that association, they can't really do, much when it comes to going overboard with, let's say, imagery, violence, blood, gore, whatever the case may be. They can't really go overboard. They can't take it to that upteenth level that a lot of people feel something like, Venom, Let There Be Carnage, or things like the upcoming Morbius, should be able to go to. All because of that partnership. Now, there's also been talk that if Sony, and again, there is word going around that they'll probably, by the end of No Way Home, if you will, and any other Spider-Man involvement in the MCU, that at the end of this deal, they are going to reacquire Spider-Man to, do as they please. So if they want to basically finally bring Venom and Carnage into Spider-Man's world, the Tom Holland world, as far as we know, right now, that if they want to do that, they got to make sure that they're appealing to all audiences. Because because basically these Spider-Man films, even though they are distributed by Sony, they are basically a conjunction. They are a joint production of Sony, Disney, and Disney-owned Marvel Studios, which is why they're not as dark as, you think they should be, when it comes to certain elements and thematic elements, I'm trying to say. So with that all said, something like Venom, Let There Be Carnage getting in PG-13 rating shouldn't be, not a surprise to anybody because, one, if you're going to appeal to that Spider-Man fan base, knowing the connection that, Venom and Carnage have with Spider-Man, and you're potentially on the verge of bringing Spider-Man, the Tom Holland one, maybe into the same universe, or at least connecting them all together as being in the same universe, then you're going to want to appeal, like I said, to all the audiences of Spider-Man, especially the ones that look at the Spider-Man films as not being as dark and gritty and violent as, Venom, Let There Be Carnage, or the first Venom movie entirely. So with Venom, Let There Be Carnage getting a PG-13 rating, yeah, it is a little disappointing because you got someone you got a character in there, a symbiote character in there, if you will, in Carnage, basically possessing that Cassidy guy who's a lot more psychotic and is basically, tailor-made for an R rating like environment. But here's a little bit of history, okay? Here's a little bit of history. One of the videos that I pieced together, that I uploaded separately several years ago. In fact, it was one of the last videos I did living in Patterson before moving here to Newman. Basically, it was a reply video to Nostalgia Critic, aka Doug Walker's video that he did, his little editorial video on basically asking the question of does PG mean anything anymore, or basically do ratings mean anything anymore. Because in that video, in that editorial, he was bringing up the fact that there was, movies that were being released in theaters or had been released in theaters that, acquired or should have acquired or gotten, different ratings than what they were given. Like one of them he brought up was Drag Me to Hell. That's one of them he brought up. And believe me when I say that you watched that, and unfortunately it was one of the films that, I saw at the hotel. I saw at one of the hotels when we were visiting Disneyland. On me and my older sister and her family were in our final days at Disneyland back in 2012. I'll say this, that definitely is one of those kind of films that deserves an R rating, especially with the imagery and stuff that, pertain to it. But instead, it got a PG-13 rating, and other examples of movies that you would think should have an R rating that got a PG-13 rating. Well, there were some even in the past, like in the 90s, and early the 90s and the late 80s, mid to late 80s, that got a PG rating that you would think should get either an R rating or a PG 13 rating, but instead they were given PG. Heck, some of the more kid-friendly films nowadays, like the My Little Pony movie of 2017 and the upcoming one that comes out in 22 days, on Netflix, are both getting PG ratings. And you look at those and you're like, how can these kind of movies get a PG rating when they're more essentially G? And that is a good question. And I think because of the fact that the ratings are more appealing, they're more like attracting to an audience if they see that, hey, this movie's not as, kid friendly as, we would think it would be, or, it's not as dark as we think it could be, or something like that. And that is why when you look at something like Venom, Let There Be Carnage, yeah, there's no doubt that it should, in my opinion, there's no doubt that it should, have an R rating. I do agree with that. But if you're going to appeal to that Spider-Man demographic, with the possibility of crossing them over, if you will, in the future, then going this route is probably the best alternative you can go with, especially if you're going to sell it to that audience. Because and here's the thing, you could still get away with some dark elements, there's no doubt. It's just, what you would expect originally for what you felt could be an R-rated film, what you would expect originally for an R-rated film, you may have to wait for maybe the uncut, uncensored edition to come out on digital and home video in the next 45 to 50 days afterwards. But yeah, I agree that, I could see, where people are coming from when they say it should have gotten an R rating. But again, if you're going to appeal to that massive Spider-Man fan base, and allude to them that there's going to be a connection down the line, between the franchises, then this is probably the best option to go with. So, but I just wanted to give my take on that. Let me know what your thoughts are down below in the comments as well as in the live chat during the premiere. Like the video, and I will talk to you all later.